So when you're selling your product, you're essentially telling a story. You're essentially telling a story, right? Stories are very important. Stories are very important. So I wanted to record a quick little branding tip for all you marketers out there about the power of telling stories, right? Stories add dimension. Stories add dimension and give people pieces to hang on to, right? And so you have to get good at telling stories if you want to be a successful marketer. If you want to successfully sell your stuff, you have to get really good at telling stories, right? So when you break down marketing and think about it, what is a radio spot? What is a TV spot? What is a online sales letter or video sales letter? They're stories. What is a testimonial from a client or a customer? That's right, it's a story, right? So, how do you get good at telling stories? Well, there's a couple of different ways. A really good way to get good at telling stories is by listening to a lot of stories, right? So I don't know if there's a storytelling group in your area or if you can find a really good storyteller that goes around, speaks at public schools, hangs out at the library. There's always normally that one dude in town who's been there forever and has seen it all. Find that guy. Listen to him tell stories, right? You may be really good at telling stories. If you're not, find a good storyteller, right? Or you probably have a friend who's really good at getting people around him or her in a party. They're good at telling stories. So listen to them. Listen to what they're doing. Listen to what they're doing. Listen to how they're engaging the audience. Listen to how they're building the story, right? There's tons of great resources online as well for telling stories, right? NPR, if you listen to NPR on the weekends, NPR typically will have a show on called Snap Judgment. It's a storytelling show, a great show. And you can listen to stories wrapped around a central theme. This American Life is the same way, right? My good friend Colin Thoreau, excellent copywriter, loves Story Labs, right? Story Labs is another great place to get stories. So start listening to stories and understand the structure of telling a good story, right? The 3-act storytelling structure, been around forever. You probably are going to be familiar with it in all the marketing that you see that sticks in your head. You're going to be familiar with it in most of the movies that you see, but the 3-act structure basically is sort of like Act 1 sets the stage. It's an introduction, lets you know sort of where this is happening, what's happening, who the main players are, who the hero is, right? Act 2 is sort of the rising conflict, right? The point of the story, right? The action in the story. It builds and something is going to happen, right? That's Act 2. And Act 3 is the conclusion, where you wrap everything up in a pretty little bow and you let everyone know sort of what the outcome is or what the lesson is, right? So there definitely is a structure to telling a good story. And you should work on this. You should work on this if you want to successfully sell anything. You have to get good at telling stories, okay? So listen to storytellers and practice this structure. And then the final piece of advice that I will give you, right, in terms of telling stories to build your brand and let people know a bit about you, adding dimension by telling stories, right? The final piece of advice that I will give you is, if this is a personal brand or a business brand that you're building, you probably have to open up a little bit more. You probably have to be a little more real, a little more honest, a little more open and authentic, and not just be focused on selling, right? Hey, David, good to see you, man. Telling stories throughout your branding process to create your life in the mind of your audience. It's a great story. They'll align with it and they'll follow. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying. I appreciate you typing that in, brother. But yes, you said that far more eloquently than I could by typing it. You know, the ad I'm thinking of right now that tells a great story in a 3-act structure is the Snickers ads. The Snickers ads, right? Act 1. They introduce a scene, a place, a moment in time, right? And they introduce the main character. Act 2, the main character is not himself. he or she is grumpy, right? Turns out they're grumpy because they're hungry. So in Act 3, they get a Snickers bar, and suddenly they're themselves again. That's a story, right? Another thing I'm thinking of particularly right now is the movie Private Parts, which is, I don't know, an old movie now, probably came out 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It's the autobiographical memoir of Howard Stern, the movie Private Parts, right? But it tells a great story, and the reason why is because it adds a lot of dimension. Howard Stern is not just the foul-mouthed radio disc jockey who tells fart jokes and, you know, does inappropriate things with women on his show, but it tells his story, it humanizes him, tells his story of his struggles coming up, right, to try and get airtime, to try and get on the right stations, to try and build a show that people would like. It tells the story of he and his wife going through some struggles, having children, and his struggle of maintaining balance between being a dad and being a radio personality. Then his struggles with the FTC or whatever, and with his boss. And at the end, Act 3, he's happy, his wife's happy, his kids are happy, everyone's happy, and he wins, right? But there's a lot of dimension in that story because it tells you so much more than what you know of Howard Stern, which is sort of that he's a foul-mouthed comedian radio personality, right? So that story pulls back the curtain a little bit. It reveals a little bit, right? And so today's Brand Bite, storytelling, tell stories, open up, share a little something. Share a little something about what your product means to you, why you're in the business that you're in, why it's important to you, right? Give people a little something of you. Let them own a little piece of the story. Let them in behind the curtain to see why you built your product, why you do what you do, how it all works, right? What the vibe is like in your office, right? Tell stories instead of just selling. Sell, 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 sell. It's a pile of crap. It's not going to get you anywhere. So I hope this video helps. I just went and got my beard fixed up by the barber. Feeling pretty good about it. So I hope this video helps. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you soon.